Hello there carpologists, I'm Dan. Today we're going to be taking a look at the FishSpy marker float. The FishSpy is something you've probably already heard of and seen a couple of videos on before. I'm not going to run you through all the finer details, but what I will do, I'll run you through the basics and then I'll explain a few different ways that you guys can use it to your advantage. So just to run you through the main body of the float itself, basically you've got an orange flight on top. If you unlock the ring there, that comes off. That will then reveal the antenna, which is inside that green stem. You've got your charging port right there. There's a red ring that you'll see. You know, whenever you're taking the flight on or off, just make sure that red rubber seal's in there because that's what makes it waterproof. The foam collar slides on and off. That just reveals the FishSpy logo underneath. And here's the important part. On the very bottom of the float, you'll see there is a camera. So it's a really good quality camera. Basically, if you're fishing really clear waters, you'll see, you know, as clear as what the human eye would. And in slightly murky waters, obviously the visibility is going to be slightly less, but you will still be able to see what's going on the bottom. You'll just have to make sure that the float's closer to the bottom. So whereas on here, I've got absolutely gin clear water, you know, from 5 feet up, I can see the bottom of the lake bed. I can see individual stones and I can see individual strands of weed. Well, I'm down on my Syndicate Lake and I've picked a swim that's got a shallow shelf out in front of it. There's only 4 or 5 foot of water on top of the shelf and the shelf runs out a good sort of 30-40 yards from the bank. Now, there's lots of different types of weed on top of this shelf. Like I said, 4 or 5 foot of water. So it's got onion weed, a little bit of silkweed, it's got broadleaf and some Canadian. So the fish love to get up on the shelf, especially this time of year when they start grouping up.
The story you're about to hear is true.
So because the FishSpy show me that there's a foot, sometimes 2 foot between each strand of weed that's coming up, you know, in the broadleaf weed, it's not really dense like Canadian, and there are areas out there where you've got at least a foot of space between each strand of weed coming up off the bottom. So because it's showing me that, what I'm doing is, as I cast my rigs out, I'm hitting the clip, and just as the lead hits the surface of the water, I'm lifting my rod tip a couple of feet, just bringing that lead back towards me whilst it's still on the surface, and then letting it free fall, you know, letting it drop straight down, and I'm getting a really good drop on the bottom. That's just one way that it's benefited me in this session. There are so many different uses for this. Even when you're not fishing, you know, if you're just pre-baiting an area, if it's an area that you can't see from a tree or from a rowing boat, and you want to be able to check whether your bait's being eaten or how quickly it's being eaten, you know, whether they're moving in on it within 24 hours or whether it's taking 2 or 3 days for them to clear the bait, you know, a couple of casts with this, look back on the app on your phone and it will tell you straight away whether there's bait still on the bottom or not. A friend of mine uses one of these where he's fishing over to a far margin that you've got no access to. You can't walk around the other side of the lake, it's strictly out of bounds, there's people's houses over there. So what he does is he casts the FishSpy over, clips the reed bed on the far margin, pops it up, and he was actually fishing there for a couple of months before we realised that there was actually quite a few stems of dead reed, you know, in the margin, a good rod length off the reed. So basically, yeah, he was fishing in amongst the stems, he was getting a good drop, his lead was hitting the bottom, but his rig was sort of laying up over the stem of a reed or a root of a reed, and he was never presented well. So yeah, when he started using these, he started fishing a couple of rod lengths off the reed bed and started catching fish. When you push the top of the marker float on, there's basically a green collar here, just above the foam ring. If you turn that once, it locks it in position. If you turn it again, that switches it on. That's now activated, you don't need to do anything else. All you do is you connect it to the app on your phone, you cast it out, and then basically pay some line off, measure it, see how deep it is, as you normally do with a standard marker float. And then once the marker float's on the surface, you can hit record on the app on your phone, and then you wind it down, drag it along the area you want to investigate, pop it back up to the surface or reel it in, and then watch back what you've just recorded. So the FishSpy has a range of roughly 60 metres if you're using an Apple iPhone. I believe it works up to 100 metres if you're using an Android device. There's a built-in memory card which will hold up to 7 hours worth of footage. The battery life on this, I believe you can get a continuous 3 hours use out of it. In the box you also get this stem which is for attaching your lead. It's got a really large metal ring on there which just makes sure that your line runs through that smoothly. You just click your lead onto the other end there via a quick link. One thing I would highly recommend is you use at least a 4 ounce lead. Obviously this is quite a large bulky item, it's extremely buoyant, and if you've got a 2.5 or a 3 or even a 3.5 ounce lead, when you're dragging it back across the bottom, it's very likely that between the buoyancy of the float and obviously the angle of your line, that it's going to be lifting the lead off the bottom and you're not going to get a true feel for what's really out there. I know you're going to be able to see it, but you still want to be able to feel stuff as well. So make sure you've got at least a 4 ounce lead on there. One of the other things I would highly recommend is you use it on a spod setup. You want quite a beefy rod. So basically I'm using a 4.5 pound Tesco spod rod. It's got 30 pound braided mainline on, and then I've got a 50 pound shock leader. The last thing you want to be doing is cracking off or pulling it into some weed and then obviously having a line breakage and then your float's left out in the middle of the pond drifting around. So yeah, make sure you use strong, reliable tackle to use it. And basically I've just got a large loop in the end of my braided shock leader, and then I'll just loop it on. I'll just slide it through the metal loop, loop it over the float, and then that way I can quickly take it off, and then I can just loop to loop my spom on there and put some bait out over the area if I want to. There really are so many different uses for it. You know, up until now, you've only been able to keep an eye on the areas you've been pre-baiting, if they're in the edge, or if you're lucky enough to fish a venue where you can use a rowing boat. But now, you know, the areas you're fishing 30, 40, 50, 60 yards out, you're able to just cast one of these out, and as long as the water's clear enough, you should be able to wind it down, check the bottom, you know, see what's going on, see if they've removed layers of silt, see if they've eaten the bait, you know, see if there's fish in the area as well. Well, I've just caught a fish on my right hand rod, and that rod was positioned on an area that I'd found with a FishSpy yesterday. I don't think I would have caught that fish if I hadn't cast the FishSpy out, because I've tried it several times in the past, little tiny light leads, you know, trying to find the drop and never really feeling it down to the bottom, or if you did, as soon as you tried to pull the lead back, you know, it was locking up instantly, and I just thought that the weed was a lot heavier than what it actually is, so I never bothered putting a rig there. I tried a solid bag once there before, and the fish continued to show over it for hours without getting a bite. So yeah, basically I do think it's caught me a bonus fish. Well, what a result. A nice dark mid-20 mirror. This one's come on the right hand rod, a rod that I positioned last night on the marginal shelf down to my right. Just 3 casts with a FishSpy marker float. I managed to find a nice tiny little hole, a hole that you normally drag a lead straight past without even knowing it's there. So absolutely over the moon with this one. The FishSpy marker float's currently available on the FishSpy website for $129.95. For more information on the product, if you're interested in purchasing one, please do take a look. Thanks for watching, and I'll see you again next time.